Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Bulletproof for BJJ podcast. I am JT.
What's up, guys? I'm Joey.
Today, we are talking about how to fix your sore fingers and tight wrists. Common problem in BJJ. People are always talking about it. My fingers are sore. My wrists are jacked. What do I do? Now, this is something I've experienced myself. I mean, I've done a lot of gi, done a bit of judo, so much gripping of the gi, spider guard, the fingers do get snafu'd. But then also so much flexion and gripping, wrists do get very tight. Have you experienced something like this, Joey?
Yeah, for sure. Over the years, I kind of intentionally don't play a lot of heavy grip game because I notice every time I try to fuck with it, I just get punished. Like for the next couple of days, I'm really sore. And even in the training session, I feel like my hands are smoked.
Yes.
And I'm like, this isn't it's not the style of jiu-jitsu I like. I don't want to feel like that.
Yep.
So I think, over the years, I've dabbled in a little bit of spider guard and whatnot and a bit of lasso.
Yep.
But I always end up going back to the X guard because you don't have to do any of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a grip centric guy, so I've kind of always leveraged it. Like not
good grips,
not a flex, but just like you can't break my grip, and that really floors people. But I have paid the price and have dislocated a finger or two in rolls, and subsequently will probably end up with terrible arthritis. But I mean, what do we do about that? Because a lot of people may not even be on that level. They've just come to jiu-jitsu. They've started gripping like a maniac because that's what happens when you start. You over grip, and then over time you learn to back it off.
the death grip,
the white belt death grip. Because
there's I think too, like of my hands, and I've wrecked fingers also, not even from the gripping thing, but from jarring them.
Yeah.
I remember one recently with our boy Kieran.
Yeah.
It was a pretty innocuous moment, but I think I passed his guard for the 15th time that round or whatever.
Kieran.
I had my, I was just had like side control, and I had like an arm under his body kind of. And it was like, flush on his body, but somehow he like bucked and tried to bridge, and my pinky finger got kind of turned in, and then he came down on it. Yeah. And I was like, and at the time I was like, fuck, that hurt, but kept rolling.
Yeah.
Man, it's wonky now.
Still swollen.
And it's been swollen for months.
Yeah.
And so I think, you cop a lot of damage to the hands and wrists, even if you're not playing the heavy grip game, don't you?
Yeah, that's true. And definitely whether you are playing a gi or no gi, because I find that even in no gi, grips get quite tired just from trying to squeeze and stay tight on certain positions. And this is just par for the course. So what are we going to do to remedy that? Because we have talked in the past about spending a lot of time in flexion and this kind of position. Now you, Joe, because you have spent more time doing handstands, and we've talked about this extension piece, do you find for yourself when you do your wrist prep and you do certain things around getting yourself ready to do a set of handstands, do you find that helps you?
Yes. I find I'm not working on handstands a huge amount at the moment, but I fuck around with them here and there. And probably the first thing I notice when I'm practicing them less is that when I first put my hands on the ground and start to warm up, I feel tight.
Yeah.
And if I'm training more jiu-jitsu around that time, or like I'm not training jiu-jitsu at the moment, right? Because we're in lockdown. But generally, if I'm sort of doing my 3 or 4 days a week of jits and not really playing with the handstands, and I go to do some handstands, I'm like, oh man, my wrists feel restricted.
Yes.
Whereas when I'm doing plenty of handstands and probably not much jiu-jitsu, I don't notice that. So yeah, I definitely notice that that just having that practice of putting my hands on the ground and starting to build that extension keeps my wrist mobility in a good place. Whereas if I'm not maintaining it regularly, it starts to go the other way.
Yeah.
And this is what we talk about, is that jiu-jitsu sends it the other way.
That's right. Yeah, I had a moment, I think it was the first time I was full-time in Brazil, 2012, blue belt, just going super hard and trying to train as much as I could. At the end of the second week, they always do the same warm-up, run around the hall. Now we do, alligator crawls and all the stuff that you do at jiu-jitsu, hip escapes. I found at the end of the second week of trying to train like 3 times a day, I couldn't put weight in my wrists. my forearms had gotten so tight that I couldn't even put weight into my hands to do the alligator crawls. They were so jacked from over gripping or just training grip so much and not doing the counter stuff of the opening up and the extension. I was very fortunate that I took an arm aid with me, which is like a forearm massager. And I basically just had to have kind of like a week off and just stretch and just try and open up my forearms and let them recover. And then I kind of came back gradually and was able to, do a push up and put that weight there. And I just thought to myself, man, I have to do more maintenance.
I had a similar experience in Brazil, but I found that there's an ancient remedy they've been using there for a long time, and you actually bathe in acai.
Oh, amazing.
And you just sprinkle the granola and the honey and the slice on top of the bath.
Right.
And your forearms come good.
Wow.
Yeah, all your injuries come good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is that what those guys are doing?
Yeah.
My God, no one shared with me. Thank you, Joe.
You got to take out a loan to purchase that quantity of acai, but works.
Yeah. Don't worry about an ice bath. You get that acai bath. Yeah, boy. I mean, you do kind of go slightly purple, but don't worry about that. The girls love it. Here's the thing, extension. So I actually had some pretty bad kind of radialis pain just about 2 years ago, just in my forearm. And it was when I was doing a fair bit of judo. And I went and saw a good friend of mine, Seamus Hayes. Shout out Seamus. He's a big, strong human, smart guy, great with kettlebells.
Iron Fix, is that Seamus?
Yep, Iron Fix.
Seen his stuff on the gram, I like it.
Check him out. He's a good guy, smart guy. And he had recommended to me to get a thick, like elastic band, rubber band, the kind of dark red, brown ones you see, they kind of look kind of industrial, and put it around the gear stick of my car and just have it sit there. So when you're sitting in traffic, put it around the fingers and then practice opening the fingers out like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's like, you spend so much time closing your hand, you actually have to practice strengthening the extensors to help balance this out. And I actually started doing it, and it did make a difference. Obviously, getting some treatment from him. He's a great myotherapist. And then also the same, very similar to the golf club routine that we have done before. We've posted on our Instagram, doing the different amounts of rotation and just working flexion, extension through the wrist, along with that opening of the fingers. Actually, it took a little while, but just getting in the habit of doing it semi-regularly made a huge difference. I would think, it's just a rubber band, like what's it going to do? But just opening up the hand and spending that time getting the blood flowing in there really helped loosen up the tissues. And that was something that made a huge difference to loosening up my sore forearms and my tight wrists. Now we do a bit of forearm prep. That's part of what we do. And I actually was exposed to that many years ago. I had aspirations to do a planche, but unfortunately 80% of my body weight's in my legs. So
what a cop-out.
Oh, come on, man. There's a
planche harder.
There's only so much you can do.
If anyone listening is not familiar with the la planche, we're talking about like a push-up position, but your hands are a little bit wider than usual, and your arms are straight. You're in the top of the push-up position, and then you're leaning forward, and then your feet are off the ground. So it's you're holding yourself in a support. Yeah, it's ridiculously hard, and if it's made even harder if you got some thickness down the bottom.
I was watching too many breakdance videos, and there's a b-boy in France called Junior. For any of you who are into breakdancing, just Google Junior. He has one leg shorter than the other, significantly, and has basically taught himself to walk on his hands and has amazing moves in the upper body. And I was like, I want to be like that guy. Little did I realize, it is a lifetime's worth of work. It's easily like if you've got skinny legs, it's a 2-3 year project. And a friend of mine was like, oh, you want to get a planche, do you? All right, do this. And he showed me his wrist prep routine, and he was showing me the wrist push-ups and the closed knuckle. Like, he's a movement guy. And I was like, I can't do any of that stuff. He's like, well, man, if your wrist can't take that, you're never going to do a planche. I was like, damn you and your facts. So I adopted this wrist prepping routine, and it was awesome. I mean, I never got anywhere close to a planche. I think I was doing like a tuck thing on the parallettes, just for like a couple of seconds at a time, but never on the floor. But by spending time working my wrists through these different ranges of motion, I actually didn't have any wrist or forearm problems for an extended period of time. As long as I was doing it, I was actually good. It was only when I went super hard jiu-jitsu, super hard weights without that maintenance, that's when the forearms and the fingers just really suffered.
Something on that is often missed, I think, by it's actually an interesting thing that I picked up in the movement sort of world, and something that I think could change things for a lot of jiu-jitsu players. When your wrists are tight, you will naturally not want to put your hands on the ground and place weight on them because your body knows that if you do that, it's going to get hurt, right? I can think of like my father's a really good example. He's tight, he's mid-60s, no, he's early 70s now, but he's tight, particularly through the hands because he's worked physically his whole life. Yeah, a lot of gripping. So he can't put his hand on the ground and then put weight on that hand because it involves too much extension of the wrist, right?
Right.
So it's to such a degree that if he's trying to, and he very rarely as a result of that gets on the ground, right? Like you're not going to see him like jump down on the floor, play with his grandkids and then hop back up because getting down and up is actually a real process for him,
of course,
right? Yeah. And obviously it's not conscious. It's just what happens, right? So, so what happens then to him if he takes a fall and tries to put because naturally if you're falling, you're going to put your hand out. So you're either going to shatter your wrist or you fuck your fingers up.
Yep.
Or you're going to break an arm, dislocate an elbow, or as happens to a lot of old people, you're going to not put the hand down properly and you're going to fall and break your hip.
Yeah.
So there's this flow-on effect of this lack of mobility, right? Now, it's not quite the situation that most of the people listening to this are finding themselves in right now. But think about this. When you're trying to play jiu-jitsu and you're trying to be, in essence, you're trying to be acrobatic and explosive. You're trying to pass someone's guard. There's like multiple things going on. Place your weight here, switch your hips. A lot of this involves you having to put your hands on the ground.
Yeah.
Or hands on the opponent.
Yes, sir.
And if you are in the same way that like you can't do a proper knee cut pass unless you've got adequate like lower body mobility, right? Through the knees and the ankles and the hip. Very similar, if you don't have this wrist mobility, you're going to be clumsy through these positions because you can't actually comfortably get into them.
Yeah, you're not going to like do that single arm post and Lucas Lepre cartwheel your way
exactly
out of the position. You're probably just going to fall on your neck.
Exactly. Yeah. And your coach is going to be like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Do it like this. Yeah, no, put your hand here.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that it's one of those things that we see with what we do that jiu-jitsu coaches tend to miss, which is like, yeah, okay, there's a technical awareness that's required in order for the student to pick up the technique, but there's also a physical capacity that's required. They need an amount of strength and an amount of mobility at a very basic level to be able to fulfill certain movements. And a lot of people on the mats don't have it.
And I would actually go a step further and say, any of you out there who've been doing jiu-jitsu, say 2-3 years, I mean, you've got your blue belt, you're somewhere into your blue belt, you probably have forearms like a 60-year-old laboring person because you are doing that much gripping. Like jiu-jitsu people do more gripping than, other than say judo, than pretty much any other sport I know, or bouldering or rock climbing. Now, here's the deal. This is the thing that's interesting to me. This is just a slight segue. Ex-client of mine from way back in the day, one of my first clients, Angus Forrest, he had a bike accident. Just riding his bike, driver wasn't looking, hit him, knocked him off his bike. He went head first and landed 2 hands forward. Completely shattered both wrists, hands, like had to have reconstructive surgery on both hands. Now, I wasn't training him at this time. I didn't know anything about it, but he contacted me about 9 months after the accident and said, man, I need your help. I need to do this rehab. This is what I learned from Angus's experience, having reconstructive surgery on his, radius and ulnar and his hands. And he was going, and it got covered by insurance. So he didn't have to pay for any of this, which is fantastic because whatever. He was getting his hands massaged every single day by nurses. Like they would put his hands in wax and he would have to try to open his hands to like crack the wax. That was like the first step on strengthening his hands.
Wow.
And then we can get into, not like old school kung fu, but how they do the hand conditioning. Like it's like striking sand, and then
Pebbles.
iron filings. And
Yeah.
it was kind of similar. They would make him put his hands into a certain viscosity of goop, and he had to open his
Goop, yeah.
I don't know. He just said it was like
Clag.
just like this kind of white gray liquid, but it was thick, and he had to open his hands out against it. This is something that he had to do almost every single day, because they said if you don't move your fingers every single day, they're just going to turn into arthritic knots because of the level of trauma that happened. And your fingers and hands are mainly connective tissue. I mean, they're an extension of the connective tissue of your forearms. There's not actually much muscle meat other than kind of around the thumb. It's mainly connective tissue. So this is what I took away from that. Whenever I have had a jarred finger or a gnarled finger, he was saying that it took 6 months of like nurses massaging his hand every single day to try to get blood to the connective tissues, because not a lot of blood flows there. And so when I totally dislocated my finger and it was pointing sideways, shout out Cyborg, you son of a gun. Anyways, passing my guard, my finger like got caught in his gi and ripped sideways. And I was like, didn't want to let him pass my guard. My finger's like this. And I was like trying not to get smashed, and then pulled my finger back to reconnect it into place. And then still got my guard passed, got smashed. But whatever. I had to just absolutely work so hard to kind of get it straight, and it's still not straight.
Yeah.
And that was when I was a purple belt. But that thing that, guys, your fingers don't get a lot of love and attention. Spending some time stretching your hands, opening up through the fingers, opening up through the wrist goes a long way to getting rid of these aches and pains, to stop you from turning yourself into a arthritic pensioner in your 30s. That's not where you want to be.
Yeah, and there's a flow-on effect downstream, or upstream rather, when you've got tight hands and tight wrists, which is elbow pain, right?
Correct.
And we deal with this with a lot of folks. And I think for people listening who maybe who work on, like if you're following our program or if you're following some kind of strength program, you can probably, this will resonate with you, where you've been doing some like heavy pulling work, whether it's bent over rows or pull-ups or chin-ups, something like that. And you get this kind of like tennis elbow, golfer's elbow. And it's usually, like if you've ever had golfer's or tennis elbow, it's really annoying. It doesn't really hurt that much, but it niggles usually on your first couple of reps.
Bit sharp.
And then you don't feel it.
Yep.
And then it's like you're trying to go to sleep at night and your elbow's aching and it just won't go away. And it'll be like that for months. And the tricky part is that you got to kind of back off from the heavy pulling work to let it settle. But often what happens is that's a result of tight forearms, which is a result of dysfunctional wrists and hands. And I think for people can maybe understand, if we look at the lower body, it's a bit simpler to understand. It's like if your feet are really fucked up and you're wearing these shoes that trap your feet all day long, like let's say you're in like really tight office shoes, your feet don't work properly. So there's a high chance that your knees are going to cop an injury because the fact that the lowest portion of your extremity doesn't work right. It feeds back up towards the knees and the hips, and you start to get issues up there. So it's the same thing with the hands and the elbows. So when I'm talking to someone and they're like, oh man, I've got issues with the elbows, that's the first thing I'll look at is, well, yeah, how's your wrist mobility? Yep. Can you get into extension? Do these stretches, like, are these manageable or do these really suck for you?
Yep.
And whenever someone's like, oh my God, how do you do that? That's so hard. You're like, that's what you need to work on.
Yeah, that's you right there, bro.
That's it. That's the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, that's you, bro.
It's true. And I can comfortably say that even about non-jiu-jitsu people. Like it is wrist, forearms.
It's a symptom of being a modern human.
That's right. We don't use our bodies enough, and therefore we get really efficient at not using them. We get really good at not doing. So then when we are forced into doing it, especially if you've got someone jumping on you and you have to post, it's not just your weight, it's their weight too. That's when things can break and it can get quite serious. So your recipe for success with this one, Joe Town, what do you recommend, or what do you personally do in terms of keeping this balanced out?
Look, I do daily, like anytime I'm going to train, and this was not a conscious decision, but whenever I'm going to go train, whatever it is, jiu-jitsu or strength training, I will do some wrist mobility. And it's just part of it. You know, I'll do some Cossack squats, I'll loosen up my hips, and then I'll just put my hands on the ground and like do a bit of that. And I might do one set, I might do 2 or 3. Sort of gauge it on the day. If I'm doing some handstands, I'll take it a bit more seriously and maybe spend 5 minutes doing a few rounds of some of those different push-up, like wrist push-up prep drills we do. And I'll also do it after jits. And this is a piece of awareness that for anyone listening, if you can try to develop this for yourself, this is super valuable. But if you can do a jit session and then at the end of the session, you kind of have an awareness of what got really overcooked in that session. So maybe we're working on spider guard that night. And I come out of that class, I'm like, man, my wrists are cooked. In the same way that if I've been working on a guard all night, my hip flexors will be super tight.
Yes.
So I'll just naturally do some wrist stretching after that, do some hip flexor stretching. And I find that that is kind of how I keep a good level of maintenance through my wrist mobility.
Definitely.
And elbow function.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been doing a lot of gripping lately, more deadlifting. Obviously, we can't do jits, so I've just been trying to strangle barbells, trying to work on my pull-up a bit more. And I make sure that I always do a certain amount of warm-up, but on the days I'm not lifting, I do at least 30 minutes working on the problem areas. So for me, left hip, little bit of shoulder, and just, wrists, elbows, just making sure I basically clean the shop so that the next day when I am lifting, I feel good. I don't feel restricted. I don't want pain in my body stopping me from doing what I want to do. And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a far more high maintenance version of that because unpredictable stuff happens. Whereas barbells and weights and gravity is pretty fixed.
And it's inherently unbalanced.
Yeah.
As in you'll spend 30 minutes of the class gripping for dear life. Whereas if you're following a strength program, it'll have this nice balance of, we need to do some pushing, some pulling, maybe some squatting. Like it has considerations of those things. Whereas jiu-jitsu is like, no, it's sport specific.
Yep.
Don't let the person pass your guard.
Yeah.
So the physical ramifications are, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, just deal with it.
Yeah.
Just eat
That's
that.
your problem.
So to solve your problem relevant to your sore fingers, guys, and your tight wrists, definitely building in a practice of prepping and then also stretching post is a super easy way, like a no-brainer for making your hands feel better, to stop you from feeling tight and sore and arthritic. And just try it. Just try it for a week. And I would say definitely, even if you're only trained jits 3 times a week and you're able to do a bit of wrist prep and stretching just 3 times a week, you will notice a difference.
Yep, and the wrists are one of those ones that you can sneak them in anywhere. Like while I'm talking to you right now, I can be stretching some wrist flexion, right? I can be using the table here. I can just be kind of stretching out a bit of wrist extension. Like you don't need a lot. You don't need to go and make it a workout or get to the gym. You just, if you start to build a bit of awareness around that, you can really start to change the way that area works for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And look, like we said before, it's really important to understand that for a modern human, tight wrists and hands are already a problem. When you do jiu-jitsu on top of that, you only consolidate or rather amplify that issue. So you got to do it.
Definitely. So we've got plenty of information around this, guys, and definitely you can have a look. We will be putting up more and more content on our YouTube channel. So if you're not across our YouTube channel, just go to YouTube, put in Bulletproof for BJJ. It'll pop up. Lots of information there, and we can update it because we do like to answer questions. And speaking of which, we actually have a bit of a special feature today, Mr. Joe.
We got the first of the official Bulletproof for BJJ podcast voicemails.
Oh yeah.
We got two that we're going to respond to today. First one's coming from Dylan. Now, bear with us, guys, because this is an extra in a similar way to that towards the end of the movie Inception. It was quite hard to understand
what's going on,
which level of dream state you were in. This is where we're at on a technological front right now. So I'm going to go ahead and play this voicemail from Dylan.
G'day, guys. I dislocated my kneecap earlier this year in a bridge and roll gone horribly wrong. I've done my rehab and I'm back on the mats now, but one leg is significantly better than the other. For example, I can bang out like a set of Cossacks easily on one leg, but it's a real struggle with, I guess, fairly poor form on the other. I'm wondering if I should change my training for the imbalance. For example, train my bad leg more or my good leg less, or should I just continue as normal and wait for things to catch up? Thanks so much. Love the program.
Awesome.
Dylan, you legend. Thank you, my brother.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure to have you ask.
Yeah, no, we appreciate all your questions.
Dislocated kneecap, that's no fun.
No, that's terrible. And it's common in jiu-jitsu. It happens. And some people, they have a bit of laxity around the knee and the kneecap pops out. And a lot of people say, oh, I just pop it back in. But they never really address it. And I think, speaking to Dylan's question, this would be my recommendation. I do keep training your good side. Like don't change that up. But the way you would approach training the problem side would need to change definitely to bring it back to a level. So, it's kind of, it's taken its step back. We've got to balance that out. So relevant to like patella tracking or any issue with that, we've got to bring back a certain amount of stability around the knee at the different ranges of motion. And that's the thing. Everyone's like, oh, just go back to pistols or whatever it is. And it's like, well, actually you've got to actually teach your knee to work again. And I mean, this might be something you can speak to as well, Joe, that idea of bringing stability in the kind of vastus medialis and being able to keep your knee over your toe while lunging, squatting and restoring range was actually a big part of what you were doing with your rehab.
It was, yeah. Look, for me, the thing that I think most in terms of responding to like what he's getting at there is like, should I be like trying to get balance back, or should I be sort of keep pushing my strong side and wait for things to even out? Things probably don't even out,
no,
do they? So you've taken an injury to one side of the body, and if you now just keep training both sides independently, you're always going to have this imbalance. Now, imbalance is it's a part of physicality. However, we do know statistically, and we know this is 100% the case, that the larger the imbalance is, the higher your chance of re-injury.
Correct.
And this is the case for any part of the body. And if you go to a physiotherapist or an exercise physiologist who's worth their weight, they will tell you that you have to get back to balance as soon as possible. Now, I had this with my own knee, and the recommendation for me was I should actually neglect my strong side in order to, because we tested it, we did strength tests, and it was like a 50% difference. So it was like, well, your strong side's 50% stronger than your weak side. You should neglect the strong side, and you should really double down on working on the weak side to try and get that within 10% difference.
Okay.
Once you get to that, then you can train both sides again.
Interesting.
And I did that, and it fucking worked well for me.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's kind of counterintuitive because, yes, there is evidence to show that it's still good to train your strong side and all those things.
Sure.
But once you're out of that acute injury phase and you can get back to moving and training, I think getting back to balance as soon as possible is the goal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's actually an awesome insight. I was going to speak to a broken limb case, which is somewhat different, but it was showing that like if you had a broken arm, if you trained your non-broken arm, it was able to reduce strength loss in the broken limb just by keeping the nervous system working. But the thing that I found because I've had imbalances with my hip and my knee through injuries, the change in the training ended up being a lot of volume on the injured side to try and just really get it, one, get the blood flowing, but two, re-educating that limb, and then reduced volume on the still some training on the uninjured side, but nowhere near the training volume of the rehab side. And what is so funny, this is not that your injury is funny, don't misunderstand me, Dill. Seen this in many clients, their rehab side becomes more stable, more coordinated than say their uninjured side.
Yeah.
People go, how's that possible? Well, you've been training the hell out of it 5 days a week.
Yeah, you're focusing for once.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good insight, Joe. So I think definitely, Dylan, if you can take something from that, it'll make a big difference to your training.
Next question.
Hey guys, I'm recording this from the toilets of the gym where I'm come for a cry. 2 days ago I got my blue belt, but I'm a 40-year-old with salt and pepper creeping in on the sides. My problem is I already feel the intensity increase where people are trying to steal my neck. What advice do you have for me to relax or progress or just not get killed? Cheers.
Now, JT, salt and pepper on the sides. You can speak to that.
Look, Joe, I feel like the thing I can't speak to is the thing I can speak to is people trying to kill me. That's for sure. And I think this happens every belt level. Thank you for your message.
Didn't get a name on that one, but yeah, thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Salt and Pepper legend. Look, it's one of those things. Age to the side, guys. I think we probably put too much stock in age. I actually think there's an advantage to being a bit older, in the sense that you actually have had a lot more experience to put stuff in perspective, whereas when you're a bit younger, you have no perspective at all. But speaking to people coming for you, it doesn't matter what age you're at. Every time you get another belt or you level up, people are coming for you.
Yeah.
You don't know it, but there's some new white belts like, I'm going to make that blue belt today.
But I think it happens in the most special way, that white to blue belt transition, because people are, you're early in the journey.
Yes.
Particularly the athletic, strong white belts who are trying to prove that they're a blue belt.
They want to smoke those blue belts.
Yeah. Whereas by the time you get to purple, brown, everyone's chilled. Like it's still on, but it's a bit more technical and a bit more kind of pure jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but what I would say relevant to this is you have to realize that there will be some people you roll who have no consideration for anything you've done. They don't care if you've got kids. They don't care how old you are. They are coming to kill you. And you've got to be kind of, even though you may not know it at the time, it's not till you get 20 seconds in the roll, you're like, my God, this guy's actually trying to kill me. And you've got to you better switch on. And you better be ready, and the thing is, it doesn't have to be a younger person. It could be an older person. It could be a higher belt. They just decide today's your day and you are getting smoked. In this situation, the best thing I can recommend is a degree of preparation. And also, sometimes it's okay to get your ass kicked. There's that too. You shouldn't, it's got nothing to do with being a blue belt. I will confess something right now. Just before I got my black belt, I got choked out by a white belt. And the gym was aghast. Now, this is a very, within context, a very savage white belt who got his blue belt not long after.
Wow, must have been a real ass kicker.
Well, no, I just didn't. I didn't respect him.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't respect him. I was like, I can pass this guy's guard. And I was passing and he tried to throw on a choke and I was like, lame choke. Next minute I was out.
Wow.
I was just, and then I kind of came to him. People were like, mate, you just got chugged out by a white belt. And no one was concerned for my well-being. People were like,
concerned for your ego.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
They would people, shame on you.
They're like, should we stay friends with James?
Mate, and I did actually have one guy who I know quite well.
I've him on my Instagram. I'm going to delete it right now.
He literally said, dude, what is wrong with you?
The white belt said that?
No. This was a brown belt. A fellow brown belt said, you fell off, bro. What? Yeah. And I was like, I actually, in truth, it didn't bother me. I think I was just a bit euphoric from a oxygen deprivation. I was like, well, let's go again. I don't mind, whatever, it's all good. Funny thing was though, after the class, he came to me like, time is off. Everybody's clearing the mat. And he goes, want to roll again, bro? And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Because I didn't take you seriously before, but now the respect level's gone up.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same roll. There's no timer and there's no witnesses, bro. I said, are you sure? And he's like, yeah.
And there are reparations to make.
Oh, mate. Right of reply. It was the worst, I don't know how many minutes of his life. I didn't even submit him. I just physically kind of just dominate, put the domination on. He never asked me to roll ever again. But what I was going to say is this. Anyone can smoke you. You can smoke anyone. And it shouldn't be too much of a personal affront. I understand when you start to get older, there's all this dialogue around, oh, you're older and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you are, sure. It doesn't matter what belt you are, someone's going to beat you. And it also doesn't matter how old you are, someone will beat you. It's jiu-jitsu. How you then internalize this and then put it in perspective is if you are just a new blue belt, white belts are going to catch you, right? And you got to grow into that blue belt. So don't feel down. Your coach clearly thinks you're good enough. Now it's time to grow. So if you feel like people are beating you on athleticism, maybe it's time to get a bit more athletic, get a bit stronger, get a bit more mobile. That's within your control. If you feel like you're not technical enough, you can also work on those skills. So then you've got to put some time and effort in to make sure you're improving in that way. And in truth, we all have those moments where we want to have a little cry because our nemesis or the kid who's just upgraded from the teens class is kicking our ass. That's jiu-jitsu, brother. You just got to accept.
I agree with all that. I think something that stands out for me, if I look at the situation that I've seen play out in a lot of the gyms I've trained at, is you have, and I don't know about this fella. I don't know if he's athletic or not, but I'm just going to make the assumption for the sake of this discussion that he's a fit, strong 40-year-old.
Sure.
And what you get often with fit, strong, sort of middle-aged guys, guys around our age, but we've been doing jiu-jitsu for over a decade. They haven't, right? So they come into the scene, and the gym, there's a lot of younger people, and the fit, strong guy can apply the fitness and the strength, but it's sometimes like they can scrap, right? But they can't sustain that. It's like you can see, you're like, oh, there's an injury waiting to happen.
Yeah.
They're kind of always pushing a little bit harder than they need to. They've got these 22-year-olds, and this and when I say guys, I gotta correct myself. This goes the same for females, right?
Definitely.
You're trying to hang at this level of output. And what happens is, I think a lot of these people end up finding themselves, fuck, I've set this level now, and I'm training in this way with my teammates that I can't sustain, and copping injuries, and then you copping disappointment, and the 22-year-olds, they don't give a fuck, they're just bouncing around like you can ragdoll them as much as you want, right? They're not getting the injuries, whatever. So what I would say to old mate is take a step back and look at how you're training. And if you're realizing like, fuck, I've been trying to match fire with fire, and I'm now finding that it's like doing me damage, and perhaps I'm on the short end more often than not, I would try and change how you're training a little bit. And it doesn't mean you can't go super hard, but you want to start to be a little bit more tactical about it. I for a long time just relied on my physicality.
Still do,
right? I know that it gets me into trouble sometimes, and I can have a role with a white belt, and it can be like wily and scrappy and all that. And I come out, I'm like, what the fuck was that? And it's like, I know it's because I went into it without any self-awareness and just scrapped with someone, right?
Sure.
So then I tell myself, okay, no, next round I'm going in with an intention to shut this person down. And I'm, whatever, maybe I'm thinking about what their game is and how I'm going to shut them down.
Controlling.
Yeah, and it's a completely different role. And it's all because of how I approached it. So I think for old mate, it's like, well, yeah, check in on how you're approaching it. And I think that the changes are there within, very similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think being strategic within how you use your energy in jiu-jitsu is important. And I think for the most part, no one teaches you this. No teacher will say to you, hey, you need to modify your energy. And hey, when you do, like, they just want you to learn jiu-jitsu. So they want you to train as much as you can and all of this. But for you, from a personal, just a personal development perspective, if you know there's someone who wants to war with you, you know you're going to have to bring the energy there. But then sometimes there's people that you can work with who are not as intense, and then you can back your energy off. You need to be modifying how you roll within a class so you don't burn out and you don't work yourself into injury. This is actually important from a self-management perspective.
Last point, actually further that, and then we've experienced this with some of the some females that we train with, right, that you coach.
Sure.
And part of it is, look, if you find yourself, maybe it's rolling with certain people in the gym, or maybe it's rolling with most of the people in the gym, but if you find that you're getting a little bit intimidated going into these roles, you're like, fuck, this is getting like way more wily than I want it to. You need to find a way to go into those roles and feel safe, be able to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So it might be a case of you're not going to dominate, but you're also not going to get your guard passed. Sure. You're not going to get into any unsafe positions. You're just going to be defensive, and you're going to be, like just keeping them at bay. That's effective jiu-jitsu.
That's a win.
Right? That's a win. So being able to feel safe in the sport that you're playing is a big part of it. So if you find, man, I'm sneaking off to the toilets for a little cry more days than not. It's like, well, let's try and find a way to build a bit of safety back into the game. And that's you, that's your technique. That's a conversation with the coach.
Yeah, definitely. And hey man, don't worry. We've all been there.
We've all been there.
All right, guys, thank you so much. If you would like us to answer a question of yours, please go to bulletproofforbjj.com and click on podcast, scroll down. There is a red button there, and you can leave us a voice message. We will play it. We will answer it.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you, Joe.
Cheers, JT.